So as we mentioned, the Prime Minister announced some major changes in policy for the auto industry today. It includes bringing back EV incentives for consumers, all part of a 5-point plan to transform the auto industry.
Canada continues to favor a zero tariff regime with the United States in autos because we know that will deliver the strongest North American auto industry. But if the U.S., through the CUSMA review, insists on some form of auto tariffs, we'll ensure that companies that sell vehicles in Canada are strongly incentivized to produce in Canada.
Let's go to Flavio Volpe. He's president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association and one of many who've been calling for changes for a long time. Flavio, thanks for joining us today. First of all, what's your overall reaction to the announcement?
Well, look, it shows that the government of Canada, and led by the Prime Minister, listens to the industry. That said plainly, the old system, the EV mandate, picked one specific technology at a moment that wasn't available to Canadians and wasn't available to Canadian manufacturers. And we said we're all committed to electrification. We have to have a ecosystem approach where we make it easier for Canadians to buy them. We make them more available. We invest in the infrastructure to charge them, and we bonus Canadian companies who are making lower carbon emitting vehicles and parts to benefit from this. I liked it. There was a risk here that we would end up in another system that said, look, let's just pick one technology and force everybody there. This allows everybody, including the companies that we're chasing in hydrogen and companies who make internal combustion but make more efficient ones, to have a path.
Okay, so let's dig into it a little bit more. What do you see as a benefit, if you do, of swapping out a sales mandate for an emission standard?
Well, look, the sales mandate said the only way to get to the point that we want is if you build electric vehicles and you build 60% of them by 2030 and 100% by 2035. And the only way to get there is if Canadians bought those cars. So it didn't do anything, though, to get the Canadians to buy those cars. But what it did was penalize producers for the lack of demand. Why were we going forward with an electric vehicle mandate? Well, we wanted to take carbon out of the tailpipe across the fleet of vehicles that are sold and manufactured in this country. So the Prime Minister said today, look, we're targeting outcomes, and that's carbon reduction to 72 grams per kilometer. And you can get there any way you want, but you have to get there. For Canadians who want electric vehicles, we're going to make it easier for you. We're going to give you a $5,000 rebate. And for those who want them, but for whatever circumstances or use case, only want to go plug-in hybrid at the moment, there's a brand new one. It's $2,500. And by the way, if you want them, and money isn't really the issue, but charging is the issue, the government is making this monumental investment of $1.5 billion into the charging infrastructure across this country. There's enough there for everybody, the consumer and the manufacturers, and for those manufacturers that we want to come here. There are no Canadian manufacturers of vehicles, just of parts. But, we're trying to chase companies like Hyundai to make the business case, and their hydrogen-powered vehicles did not make the grade in the former EV mandate.
Okay, so there is still a goal of having 75% of vehicle sales be EVs by 2035. So don't you think that just kicks the can down the road?
No, actually, it isn't a goal of 75% EV sales. What it is it's a reduction in carbon that would be the equivalent of 75% EV sales. What this is going to do is going to take those companies that right now, for their vehicles and those use cases, have V8s or 6-cylinder engines, and say, you can get there to that carbon target with smaller, more efficient engines, or you can get there with plug-in hybrid, or you can get there with hydrogen fuel cell, or you do it in boiling warm water. However you want to get there, the carbon at the tailpipe is equivalent to 75% EVs, but we're not going to tell you they need to be EVs. They just have to reduce the carbon that we emit. And in the end, we don't have a climate crisis because we don't have EVs. We have a climate crisis writ large because there's too much carbon being emitted by industry, by consumers, by society. So this says you're going to have to do your part as automakers to reduce the carbon output. How you get there could be your choice, whatever recipe that you have. And you have to get there. If you don't, you can't certify those vehicles. So Canadians whose priority is making advances in climate and not necessarily making EVs should know that the government of Canada did not relent on the climate objectives here. It just said, hey, especially to the companies that are invested here, buying Canadian capital and equipment and employing Canadians, we're not going to bonus the Chinese who are way ahead on EVs here. If you can find your own way there, we'll co-invest with you, but you must get there.
Okay. You mentioned that we don't make EVs in Canada. We make parts, but we don't actually make the vehicles. What in the announcement today will bring some of that production or lure some of that production to Canada?
Well, to be clear, I'm saying there's no Canadian auto company that makes EVs, but there are companies in Canada making EVs and plug-in hybrids and conventional hybrids. That's anything from Stellantis down in Windsor to Toyota and Woodstock to Honda and Alliston. What this allows the companies to do is to say, look, you can offer an EV product and a plug-in hybrid or a hydrogen fuel cell. And some companies like Hyundai do all of them. Toyota does all of them. And it says, you don't have to just be in the business of making EVs and hoping that somebody buys them. You take your whole fleet of everything that you do, and we're going to reduce carbon by 57% by 2035. And however you get that mix there, know that product has to be sellable to Canadians. We'll help them buy them if they're EVs. But if you want to get there in another mix, you can. That allows those companies to take different risks on product designation. Why would they do it in Canada is the question you're getting at. In this country, we have the world's biggest supply of the critical minerals and the chemistries that go into the batteries of all of those vehicles. A battery in a Mustang Mach-E is about half the value of the vehicle. Right now, they're being manufactured in North America, but they don't have Canadian chemistry in them. Why? Because we haven't made the business case yet for our critical minerals. So the more flexibility that manufacturers have, the more flexibility they get in the windup. But together with the other things that this government has done on major projects, permitting and infrastructure support, we could start telling Ford Motor Company that you can get the lithium from Canada in 2030 at this quantity, at this price, at this location. This is just a much more mature approach and an ecosystem approach to the same problem, but one that's realistic for companies that are already invested in Canada, that are buying Canadian parts and employing Canadian workers. And that's really important given what we're facing at the White House.
All right, Flavio, got to leave it there. I'd love to talk some more, but I'm out of time. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.